5-6. We're about to enjoy our first digital English lesson. We are in Chapter 8, the very first lesson, and I know it's been a little while since we've been in our English textbooks. So I'm actually going to start here at the bottom of the first page of the lesson on the intro sentences, reviewing how we do these. And these are called mixed patterns, and you'll see why. First of all, we read the sentence, "My friend helps me in the afternoon with my homework." All right, so we have to identify who's the sentence about, who's doing the action, right? Action sounds like helping. So who's doing the helping? My friend, that's an SN, not an SP. Friend, what is being said about friend? Friend helps. What kind of friend? My friend. PPA. All right, my friend helps who or what after the verb. When you can answer that question, which we can, we have what's called a verb transitive, sending action to me. Helps who? Helps me. I see a couple of signal words here, right? Those are on our preposition list. What do I do with those? I always stick a parenthesis in front of them. All right, and I always know the is an article, my is a PPA describing the words that come after. So these are probably the nouns, which are serving as the objects of the prepositional phrases. Now, what kind of sentence do we have? My friend helps me, period, statement, declarative. Don't forget your slash comes between SN and V. I don't see any adverbs to displace that. We have a VT here, right? We have an SN, VT. So what pattern is that? It's an SN, VT, maybe fit the DO under here. We have a pattern 2 then. But since I said there's mixed patterns, watch out, maybe there's a pattern 1 in here. I don't know. Will you ride on the chartered bus with Lauren and me in December? Who's the sentence about? I know we have people back here, but they are after a preposition. Maybe I'll already notice I've got a compound preposition back here. So these are compound objects. And you can't use a subject in a prepositional phrase. We can't use any of this stuff. Not that I would have thought December is who the sentence is about. But the sentence is about you, which is a pronoun. If you are what the sentence is about, what are you doing or being asked about doing? What's being said about you? You ride. Not just you ride, but in the future, you will ride. Will is a helper verb. At the beginning of a sentence usually signals we've got ourselves one of these sentences, right? What sentences end in that punctuation? We call that a interrogative or question sentence. Once again, on is a preposition and the is an article adjective. Knowing your prepositions is a huge part of being able to do sentences. Now, on what or on whom? Does chartered sound like a what or a whom we can be on? Or does bus sound like something like a what or whom we can be on? On what? On bus. And then what does chartered answer? Says what kind of bus. And those are adjective words. We already did the type of sentence a little early. Where would I put my slash mark for a sentence like this? We want to put it between the subject and the verb, but we know that a helper verb is part of a predicate. So we have to put underlines in here, which show that we understand will is a predicate word because it's a verb. And we don't have any direct objects, no who or what, being asked after the verb. So it's just an SNV. Pattern 1. My aunt. I'm going to change color so you can see the new stuff. Who's being talked about? Aunt. But keep reading. My aunt and uncle. What's being said about them? They're taking Chris and me to the Smoky Mountains. Okay. Let's start with are. Are is the past tense of, no, the plural the plural of the be verb is. Is singular, are is plural. Why do you think they used the plural one instead of singular? Because they have more than one in the subject. They have compound subject nouns. So we use the plural helper are to create are taking. I'm going to pop that slash between the subject and the verb because I'm so confident about it. Can I answer the question, taking who or what? Yeah, taking who? Taking Chris. If you can ask who or what after the verb, right? That means we have a verb transitive and a direct object. It's not just Chris, taking Chris and taking me. So those are compound direct objects. To is a preposition. What do we want to do with capital letters? Means we have a proper noun. It's kind of like a compound noun. So this is all one big object of the preposition. My aunt and uncle are taking Chris and me to the Smoky Mountains. So we got both of our ands figured, the compound parts there. What kind of sentence? This is a statement of fact. It's declarative. We did have a verb transitive. So it's a VTDO, and then again, mixed patterns. Pattern 2, pattern 1, pattern 2. No underlines needed, no adverb exceptions. Everything looks dandy. So there's a little review of how we do our sentences, and I hope that's helpful for your homework. I'm going to zoom out now. We are learning today about pronouns. Pronouns. We've already, I think, learned about the subject pronouns. To review, the subject pronouns look like these right here, down this yellow column here. The subject pronouns include I, you, he, she, it. I is the first person, you is the second person, he and she are third person male and female, it is if it's an object or doesn't have gender. Then we have plural subject pronouns like we, you again, doesn't change singular or plural, and they. How do we use these? Well, think of a sentence where we use one of these. Try she. What's a sentence where I'd use the pronoun she? How about she jumped on a trampoline? Did she come at the beginning or the end of the sentence? So which part of the sentence is she? Subject or predicate? In the sentence, she jumped on the trampoline, she is in the subject. In fact, she is the subject. It's called a subject pronoun, or we might even call it the subjective case. Object pronouns are the pronouns that match, right? Because I and me sound similar, like they're talking about me, the same person. But it's if I'm talking about me in the predicate at the end of the sentence or after the verb, normally. So instead of I jumped on the trampoline, maybe it's my brothers jumped on me. So I'm on the back of the sentence, so it's me. You wouldn't say my brothers jumped on I. That's the difference. Object pronouns are the way we use these pronouns, but in the back of the sentence. They're like, you could just call them predicate pronouns if you want. The reason we call them object pronouns is because the noun jobs that these pronouns take care of are all with the word object in them. Like direct, what? Object. And then soon to learn about the indirect object. So that's what we're learning about today. There's even a jingle here for them, so you remember those 7 object pronouns. Me and us, him and her, it and they and you. Those are the object pronouns. All right? They are talked about here in reference 135 at the top of the second page. The object pronoun can be used as direct objects and indirect objects, like I mentioned. And then we don't want to forget about objects of the preposition. That's also where we'll see things like him, right? Him, us, me. Here is a direct object. This one's an indirect object. Indirect objects are someone who's receiving the direct object. See, direct objects were something that received the action of the verb. Encourage who? Encourage us. Now, me is where the verb sent to the direct object gave what? Gave advice. to, right? Advice to me. That's a way to think of it. Now, if you put the indirect object me after to, then you got a prepositional phrase, and it's not an indirect object. We're going to get a lot of that right now. So this is still a prepositional phrase, even though it sort of says the same thing as, I could say Tom gave him the keys. That would be an indirect object, direct object, pattern 3. But if we use the word to, it's just a pattern 1. No, pattern 2, because we've, got Tom gave what keys, and then this is just a prepositional phrase, right? So object pronouns are the pronouns me, us, him, her, it, them, you. That's the forms of the pronouns we use in these 3 cases. They're called the object pronouns, not the subject, not I and he, but object, me, him, her. You is silly because you is the same for singular, for plural, object, subject, real easy. All right. We already talked about our mixed pattern sentences. Let's just talk about verb tenses for a few moments today. What does tense mean with verbs? Again, it's telling us when, right? It's telling us time. Tense means time of the action being read about, and the verb carries that significance. It tells us when. By telling me Troy's dad keeps, and not what's the past of keeps. See, now you have to know these. Keeps in the past, if I were to say it would happen yesterday, I'd say kept. Troy's dad kept. But by saying the verb Troy's dad keeps, which is present tense, right? I know this is happening now as we tell the story. He throws sacks of feed in the back of the farm truck. Sweat pours. What are you noticing about all these verbs? When they're singular, right? Because they're all just Troy's dad. They end in S if they're regular. So if you see a verb that ends in S, there's a good chance it's a present tense and probably a singular verb. He struggles, strains, lifts. See how easy it is to be able to tell when is this happening if they bold and isolate and separate all the verbs. Now here, we have a verb that does not end in S. It doesn't mean it's past. It's plural, okay? It doesn't end in S, but it also doesn't end in ED. So it's still present. Why is it different? Because they, right? They is a plural, but Troy was only singular. So if it's a plural verb, it might not end in S, but it still doesn't end in past tense endings like ED. Another ending for present tense is ing if you use the helper is. That's another way to make the present tense is gaining, right? To make sure it's all written in the present tense, you could take each verb, check whether that's the present, or if you would use that version if you were talking about it happening before yesterday. So they separate them all out. We look at them all separated in a list. I mean, if they already have them all separated like this, I think that's easy enough. They all have to match. We don't want to go back and forth if we can help it. That's confusing for the reader. So you want them all to either be present or all of them to be past. So you're going to actually have to practice, what if I change these from present into past? All right, the way we would do that, we would take each one and we have to know, what's the past of keeps? It's irregular. It's not going to end in ED. It ends in T, and it changes the vowel. If Troy's dad keeps a pace today, what if he does it yesterday? Troy's dad kept a steady pace yesterday, right? You probably know a lot of these just from saying English for so many years. Throws is very strange. It doesn't even end in a D or a T. Yesterday I threw. Either you have to look these up in a dictionary or a thesaurus, or you look up what's the past, simple past for throws, right? Simple past is what we're using mostly today. Or you look it up in your book. There's a page where they have all the principal parts. But a lot of the time you'll just say pours. That's regular. I just know it sounds right to say poured. So that's an example of a regular verb. Normal verbs, you add ed to the root and you've created the past tense. All right, and then they do that with the rest of them. I think you've got the idea. And then they rewrite the paragraph with Troy's dad kept a steady pace as he threw sacks of feed. Notice, it doesn't just go as he struggles to keep up with his dad.